GLC presents brought to you by the donations of our faithful partners.
Hi, I'm so glad you're back. I hope you like these. I wish you'd write me and tell me, how is it changing your life? Because that's what I really want to do. I want to be a people changer. I want God to use my life in such a way and put words in my mouth in such a way that people's lives are touched and they're changed. Because God has changed me. Jesus has changed me from the inside out. And He's been doing it for a long, long time. I found the Lord and asked Him into my heart when I was 9 years old. And now I'm 63, I think I am. And so God's just been working and working and working all of these years in my life. Today we're talking about, what is your cross? You hear people say, well, you have a cross to bear. Well, that's just the cross I have to bear. And the Bible talks about a cross. Look at this picture of this man carrying this cross. And I'm going to tell you a story. This is just a story. One time there was a man, and he got so tired of carrying his cross. He just got tired of it. And he said, Lord, I'm so tired. I want another cross. I just want another one. And Jesus said to him, okay, go in that room in there. There's a bunch of crosses in there. Try them out. Figure out which one you want, and you can carry that. That'll be your cross from now on. So the man goes in the room, and he spends all day trying these crosses on, one and then another and then another. Finally, he finds the one that he can handle. He can barely handle it, but he can handle it. And so he says, this is the one I want. And guess what? It was the one he walked in with. God never puts more on you than you can handle. Some of you, life has been unfair. It hasn't been good. There's been a lot of tragedy. There's been a lot of heartache. And it's been almost enough to do you in. But look, you're still alive. And you know the Lord. And He loves you and you love Him. And so we're going to talk about, is that your cross? Is that what a cross is? In Jesus' day, the cross was not something we all wear around our neck to prove that we're a Christian. It was an electric chair. It was the equivalent of the electric chair. So none of us would even think of going around carrying a little electric chair around our neck to prove that we loved God and we were believers. But in those days, it was the worst way to die. People dreaded it. And the Romans were especially good at it. They would put these crosses up along just one after another for miles down the main road that people had to travel. And it would take somebody about 3 days to die on a cross. It took that long. And so, of course, they were in terrible agony, and they were moaning and crying, and people had to see it. And so people knew what a cross was. It was not anything glorious. It was something to be ashamed of. They put thieves on crosses. If you stole things, you were crucified. And so Jesus saw those crosses too, and He saw what they had to go through. And that's part of the reason why He said, Lord, in the Garden of Gethsemane, if there's any way, Father, I don't have to do this. I don't want to do it. Well, what was He talking about? Was He talking about just what everybody else went through that hung on a cross in that day? No, He wasn't. That was bad enough, and He knew it was bad enough. But it was more than that. His particular thing that He dreaded having to do was having all of the sin of the world laid on Him. Now, when you and I sin, think about how it makes us feel. And when we see somebody else sin, and especially if it's something that we think is disgusting, just horrible, and the pain it causes people that have to experience the results of that sin, then we think, well, I don't want to ever do anything like that. Well, Jesus had to take on all the sin of all people for all of time and for time to come till He comes back. What a burden, a crushing burden, almost unbearable. And that's what he was talking about. If there is any way I don't have to do this, please, I don't want to have to do it. But nevertheless, not my will, but thine. And that's how we have to be. Look at this scripture in Mark 8. Then, calling the crowd to join his disciples, he said, if any of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel or the good news, you will save it. So what was he saying? He obviously, even then, they weren't saying, well, you go out, everybody has to go out and get crucified. He wasn't saying that. But it was an expression, and it meant you have to take up something very, very heavy, very weighty. The cross cut into their flesh. They got splinters. I guess, have you ever tried to carry a railroad tie? I've done it. It about makes your head pop open. They're so heavy. I mean, I didn't do it by myself. You couldn't. But my husband and I were trying to landscape with someone time, and they're terribly heavy. And Jesus had to carry this cross all by himself after he had been beaten and whipped, kept up all night, no food, no water, mocked. So when Jesus is saying, if you want to be my follower, then you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross, and follow me. And what that take up your cross meant was different to different people. Notice it says take up your cross. It doesn't say take up the cross, take up my cross. It says take up your cross. So you have to figure out what your cross is. And that's what we're going to do today. Another thing I want you to notice about that verse, it says that Jesus called to the crowd to join his disciples. So he wasn't talking to his disciples when he said this. He was talking to the huge crowd of people. Now, are you aware that Jesus had a lot of people following him and then a large crowd of disciples? He had at least 72 because he sent them out to do the works that he ordained for them to do. And I think there were 72 there. And then he had his inner circle that he called apostles, sent ones. And they were the 12 that you know about. But Jesus was speaking to the crowd. And you know, Jesus speaks to the crowd today. He's speaking to you right now. Listen, he says, if you want to be my follower, turn from your selfish ways. Take up your cross and follow me. Because if you try to keep your life, you're going to lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the gospel, you'll find it. Well, what does that mean, for my sake and the sake of the gospel? Aren't they the same thing? I don't think they are. Because it's possible for people to follow Jesus and then actually not do anything of any kind of work in the kingdom of God. They're good Christians, but they don't do any kind of work that's actually in some kind of work that Jesus would need them to do. They don't ever do it. They say, well, I got my family, I got my job, it's about all I can do. God don't ask me to do any kind of a ministry. But look what that says. It says, take up your cross and follow me, and for my sake and for the sake of the gospel, for the good news. Because I tell you, whatever your cross is, there will come a crossroads like this. And there will be a time that you're carrying your cross with you, and it comes to the crossroads. And God says, are you going to follow me? Are you going to do what I tell you to do? Even if it's hard? Even if it requires great sacrifice? Even if you have these hard things going on in your life? Are you going to follow me? And are you going to be involved in my kingdom's work? Because God has work for everybody to do in the kingdom. Every one of us have something to do. And it's important to God. And don't ever think, well, that doesn't look like a very big job. I knew God wanted me to do it, but it wasn't that big. Oh, yeah. It was real big if God wanted it done because He asked you to do it. So you want to be busy doing that. Dying to self is what we're talking about. What are your selfish ways? Well, we all have them. The big I, always watching out for me, 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 me. You know how Joyce Meyer does that thing about what about me, what about me? We're all like that. We have to die to it. Don't be ashamed that you're like that. I guess be ashamed if you don't do anything about it, because we can die to ourselves. What does it mean? Let me give you some ideas of what it would be like to turn from your selfish ways. Always thinking about yourself first. Always watching out for yourself, thinking, well, nobody else is going to take care of me. I got to watch out for me. Being stingy instead of generous. Having a negative outlook on everything. Thinking everything has to go your way. You know the way it ought to go, and everybody needs to get in line and do it the way you think it ought to be done because you know. Another is only watching out and making sure that everything benefits you. Everyone has to fit your time schedule. Maybe you're inconsiderate. Maybe you're self-absorbed. Maybe you're always wondering, what's in it for me? But there are other things that are selfishness. There are times that there are people in your family that either through something that you didn't have anything to do with caused them to have an accident or an illness, and they have to be taken care of. And you thought, I had such great plans for my life. I just knew I was going to get to do such and such. And now I'm going to have to take care of them. But you know, that's dying to yourself. And if you can do that with a glad heart and a sweet heart, God will bless you for it. And He will still find a way to use you in even greater ways because you were willing to die to yourself. You know, I think it blesses God to see us die from our own ways and our selfishness. I think it thrills Him. I think it makes Him proud of us. Well, what is your particular cross? I wonder about that a lot. Do you wonder about that? You know, what does that mean? And why did Jesus say it? It's the hard thing in your life that you have to deal with and still be able to follow God. That's about what it is. What is that hard thing in your life? It's that thing that you'd really rather not have to do it, but you got to do it. And yet you've got to find a way to serve God anyway. The thing that makes it so hard for you to serve Jesus. And I'll tell you another thing about what your cross can be. It can be following Jesus wherever He goes. In America, I think about this a lot. When we have hard times, I don't want to minimize that because there are some really hard times that go on in America with health, with money, with children, marriages, jobs, and it can be terrible pressure that you think is going to eat you alive. But because I travel so much around the world, I meet people that are way, way, way worse off than we are. They couldn't even comprehend it. One time, a lady from Belarus came to America, a nurse. She came to America, and they took her to Walmart. And she stood there, and you know what she said? I'm seeing it, and I still don't believe it, because they had so little on their shelves. Now think about however hard your life is right now, and having to live that same life in a country where the president was a dictator, where if you crossed him, you disappeared. Your family members disappeared. You could be beaten. That's not anything we have to deal with. So we don't really understand how hard it can be to really follow Jesus. But we hear those stories, and don't you admire people? One time I went to Rome and I went to the catacombs. And one of the stories about the catacombs is that's where when people were martyred for Jesus and everybody was dying, they would run down there and hide. But the guide said that's not true, but many, many Christians were buried here after they died, and they did have meetings here. I saw one that made such an impact on me. It was a marble casket, and on the top of the casket was a woman's female body laid out on the ground, and her neck had been severed, and you could see where it had been. And this marble carving, you could still see. When she died, she said, I want you to place my hands. I'm trying to look in the mirror, in the TV viewer to see. I want you to place my hands like this, with these 3 fingers up. She said, I want it always to be a witness to people who are serving Jesus, to always remember Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. What a witness. She carried her cross of serving Jesus in very difficult times of persecution all the way to the grave, and then did that, and it's carried and touched people for centuries. Because here it is 2,000 years later, and I saw that, and I prayed, oh Lord, let me be the kind of person that could do something like that. I don't see how in the world I could do anything like that, but strengthen me where I could. If you follow Jesus and he takes you down hard paths, you do find yourself losing your life, because it gets so hard that you begin to have to let go of some baggage. And so let's just say you were self-absorbed. Well, you can't be anymore. You have to be absorbed about this other situation. And so you let go of it. You have to. You're forced to let go of it because you don't have a choice. And so much of the time, our cross involves situations that we really don't have a choice about. And as you do that, you will discover that you begin to lose your life. Well, what's another way you lose your life? Oh, let's say time schedule. Because a lot of you that watch this show are incredibly busy, and then people need you. And you have to be willing to stop doing what you think is important and help the people that God sends you. So that would be one of losing your life. What would be another one? Quit worrying about what's in it for you. Instead, become a servant to all people, and always be thinking, how can I help them? What do they need? What would be the best way to help them? That causes you to lose your life. And by losing your life, I'm talking about things can get very inconvenient for you. It cannot go as smoothly as it once did. But that's what he's talking about, laying down your life. Another is to never be ashamed of Jesus and his message. That's part of your cross. Because in the world today, and especially in America, Christianity is not looked at with the regard that it once was. Sometimes when I'm on an airplane or meeting people I don't know, and I say, we're talking, they say, well, what do you do, Betty? And I say, I'm in the ministry. Oh, it happens constantly. In fact, it happens so much I get tired of it. They don't go, oh. They go, oh. Well, when you go to Africa and you're in the ministry, there is such a respect. They almost stand at attention. And the pastor, one of the pastors I work with over there said, well, Betty, that's because the politicians are so crooked that they just have to trust the people in the ministry more. And he said, yeah, there's some crooked ones there too, but there's a lot of really godly ones. And so you can't ever be ashamed of Jesus and his message. Jesus said, if you will acknowledge me in front of men, I'll acknowledge you in front of my Father. But if you're ashamed of me before men, I'll be ashamed of you before my Father. So part of your cross is to get in those places where people mock Christianity, or they don't like it, or they don't believe it, and then right there in that place where it's hard, you're not ashamed of Jesus, and you're not ashamed of his message. It will enable you to keep your soul. You know, your soul is your mind, your will, and your emotions. There's something about laying down your life that causes your soul to flourish. I have a little saying I try to live by concerning my ministry. Don't judge success by ministry size, fame, money, or prominence. Instead, judge success by humility, compassion, and a Christ-like spirit. So there's something about laying down your life. You think you're going to die, but really, as you pick up the life of Jesus, you pick up humility, which everybody loves. You pick up compassion. Oh my goodness, think what they think of Mother Teresa. She was compassion personified, the lowest of the low, and she treated them as if they were Jesus himself. So the compassion and the Christ-like spirit and the humility come, excuse me, when you lay down your life. Your soul is nourished in the most wonderful way. Well, what else did he say to explain in even more detail what it meant about take up your cross and follow me? In this second scripture I want to show you, it's Matthew 10. It says, don't think I've come to make life cozy. I've come to cut with a sharp knife. And then it names all of the places. And then it says, well-meaning family members can be your worst enemies. And if you prefer them over me, you don't deserve me. Now, is Jesus saying, get rid of your family, leave your family completely? No, he's really not saying that. What he's really saying is, if you prefer them over me, you don't deserve me. God has to be number one in your life. One time we were teaching in a college department, and one of the girls there was so in love with this guy, and they were having trouble in their relationship. And he was Christian too. And they were about to break up, and she went to him and she said, I don't think I can live without you. I don't want to be without you. You're the most important thing in my life. And he said to her, then there's where you're wrong. Because God is supposed to be number one, and I'm supposed to be number two. And what he was saying was, when you put those things in the right place and put God in the first place, it's like it ought to be, and it makes carrying your cross easier. I can tell you that, because those people are where they need to be. But you have to do that. God does not call every one of us to die on a cross. And I'm talking about die on one. But he does say, take it up and carry it. And he doesn't ask us to die by some horrible death, even though some of us will. Have you ever done much studying of martyrs? You know, there's a lot of martyrs in the world today. There's a magazine you can get, online even, about martyrs, telling about all over the world where people are beaten for being Christians, for doing the will of God, for not denying the Lord and not being ashamed of Him. And that's just not going to happen to very many of us. But if you read in Revelation what happens to people who are martyrs, it's going to be for all of eternity, folks. They wear these white robes that have been washed in the blood. They're honored for all of eternity. And eternity is a lot longer than life on earth. So you have to be willing to die even like that. You think, oh, I'm not willing to do that. I don't know if I could do that. Peter had the same problem. Except Peter had kind of the opposite. Oh, God, of course I'll do it. I'm not going to let anybody do anything to you. And then the first thing that happens is he gets in the really scary situation and he denies Jesus. And he goes out and weeps bitterly. Well, at this same trip that I went to Rome, they told a little bit about what happened when Peter came there, because Peter and Paul ended up in prison in Rome together, and they died there. Peter, by the time it came to the end of his life, it says in tradition he was so scared he was running away from Rome, and he heard the voice of the Lord speaking to him that said, Quo vadis, Peter? Where are you going, Peter? And he turned around and he went back and he died. He died upside down. He wanted to be crucified upside down. He said, I don't deserve to be crucified like my Lord was. You have to be ready. If the end times continue like they are, and we are in the end times, it could get really, really bad before we're raptured. It could get really scary. If it's scary like that in other countries, why do we think it couldn't happen in America? So you have to be ready. You have to be ready even as a child. Look at these pictures. This little girl helping her little sister. This little boy giving an apple away. They are laying down their lives too. You can start from the very beginning. Look what they're doing, and that pleases God. Does Jesus mean more to you than anything in the world? You have to love him more than anything. Look at this picture that's saying, help. Well, that's the help you need to do the cross that God has set up for you. There's a guy named Ray McCauley that lived in South Africa, and I think he ran for Mr. Universe at one point. And as a Christian, he really served God, worked hard. One night he was so tired and went to his apartment, and the doorbell buzzer rang. Nope, I don't want to talk. And he had to. God said, you're my servant. Answer it no matter how tired you are. Take up your cross and follow him. Hello, I'm Betty Swann with the Pennies from Heaven Project. You know, these pennies just keep coming in more and more and more. It is over $36,000. Now that's in pennies, and 100% of that has gone for food. Nothing spent for expenses. And then I've been so careful to make sure the people who distribute the food are honorable people and have integrity. You just sent enough money in to send money to Vietnam, and we took care of feeding people in a village of lepers, people without arms and legs. All over the world, we're feeding people together. I really appreciate it. Just keep doing it. Tell your friends to do it. And thank you for helping. You're just great people. Thanks.
Order your copy today from the GLC bookstore by calling the number on your screen. Please include the program number when ordering.